Imagine being told to leave your island, not because of war, not because of famine, not because of a storm, but because the world's most powerful nations wanted to test nuclear weapons there. Imagine being taken from your home, your lagoon, your land, your history, and told that it was for the good of humanity. Then imagine never truly getting your island back. This is Bikini Atoll, a place with one of the most beautiful names and one of the darkest modern histories. On the surface, it looks like paradise. Blue water, palm trees, coral reefs. A remote Pacific atoll surrounded by stillness. But beneath that beauty is a story of destruction, displacement, radiation, and silence. Because Bikini Atoll was not made famous by nature, it was made famous by the bomb. This is the true story of the island destroyed by nuclear testing. Bikini Atoll is part of the Marshall Islands in the central Pacific Ocean. Like many atolls, it looks almost unreal from above. A ring of small islands around a bright lagoon, remote, calm, isolated. For the people who lived there, this was not some exotic location on a map. It was home. That is the first thing that matters in this story. Before Bikini became a symbol of nuclear power, it was a living place, a community, a homeland, a place tied to memory, identity, and daily life. But after World War II, the United States began looking for remote locations where it could test atomic weapons, and Bikini was chosen. That choice changed everything. In 1946, the local population was asked to leave so that the atoll could be used for nuclear testing. They were told, in effect, that their sacrifice would help end future wars and benefit mankind. That sentence hangs over the entire history of Bikini. Because it sounds grand, it sounds historic, it sounds morally significant. But for the people forced to leave, it meant losing their home. That is what gives the story its emotional weight. Bikini was not empty land. It was made empty. And that difference matters. What happened next would make the atoll one of the most infamous places in the nuclear age. Beginning in 1946, the United States conducted nuclear tests at Bikini Atoll as part of Operation Crossroads and later programs. The explosions were not small. They were world-shaping events. Ships were positioned in the lagoon. Scientists observed blast effects. The atoll became part laboratory, part military theater, part warning to the world. And the tests kept coming. Because at this point, you might think Bikini Atoll is simply a story about explosions, but it is more disturbing than that. It is a story about what happens after the explosion. The blast is only the beginning. What remains is contamination, exile, a poisoned homeland, a place that becomes famous around the world while becoming harder and harder for its own people to safely return to. That is what makes Bikini so haunting. It was not just damaged, it was transformed into a symbol. One of the most infamous tests conducted there was the 1954 Castle Bravo detonation. It was far more powerful than expected. The explosion contaminated large areas and exposed nearby island populations and personnel to dangerous radioactive fallout. That moment became one of the defining events in the global story of nuclear testing. And from there, Bikini stopped being just an atoll. It became a warning. The island group had become proof that nuclear power was not only about military strength, it was also about contamination that could outlast the moment of detonation itself. That is why Bikini feels so eerie today, because it is not ruined in the usual way. It is not like an abandoned town with broken windows. It is not like a city destroyed by war. It is not a dramatic ruin full of obvious collapse. It is quieter than that. The danger is partly invisible, and invisible danger is often more disturbing than visible destruction. You can see a broken building, you can see a burned street, you can see an empty city, but radiation does not work that way. A beautiful place can remain dangerous. A peaceful lagoon can hold a terrible history. A tropical island can carry the memory of an event that changed the world. That contrast is what gives Bikini Atoll its strange power. Paradise on the surface, nuclear trauma underneath. There is another reason the story stays with people. Bikini was not only tested, it was emptied. The original community was displaced, and their history became tied to exile, contamination, and broken promises of return. That changes the meaning of the place completely, because when people hear the name Bikini, many think first of the swimsuit, the bomb, or old military footage, but there were people there before any of that. Real families, real traditions, real roots. That human reality matters. Otherwise, the atoll becomes just a backdrop for global history, and it was never just that. It was home before it was a test site, and that makes what happened there much darker.
The world remembers Bikini Atoll because it was spectacular. Huge blasts, massive clouds, sunken ships, Cold War symbolism. But the deeper story is not spectacle. It is sacrifice. Not chosen sacrifice by the people who lived there, but sacrifice imposed on them by larger powers. That is why Bikini feels bigger than just one island. It represents the logic of the nuclear age. Remote places, small communities, and distant ecosystems could be treated as acceptable cost in the pursuit of power. That is a chilling idea, and it helps explain why Bikini still matters now. Today, the atoll remains one of the most iconic places connected to nuclear testing. Its lagoon still contains the wrecks of ships used in the tests. Its name still carries global recognition. Its landscape still attracts fascination because it combines beauty, destruction, and historical unease in one place. But fascination can hide discomfort, because when people look at Bikini, they are often looking at a place that was made globally famous by being made locally unlivable. That is the deepest contradiction in the story. The world learned from what happened there, but the people of Bikini paid the price. And that is why the place continues to feel morally heavy. Not just historically important, not just visually strange, heavy. In the end, Bikini Atoll is one of the strangest places on Earth because it breaks the viewer's expectations. It is beautiful, but not innocent, peaceful, but not untouched, remote, but deeply connected to world history. It reminds us that some of the darkest places in history do not always look dark. Sometimes they look calm, sometimes they look empty, sometimes they look like paradise. And that is exactly what makes them so unsettling. Bikini Atoll was not destroyed in the way people usually imagine destruction. It was transformed by science, war, power, and radiation into something far stranger, a place the world remembers and the original community was forced to lose. A tropical atoll became a nuclear symbol, and that is why Bikini Atoll still haunts the modern imagination. If you enjoy strange places, abandoned histories, forgotten geography, and real stories that feel stranger than fiction, subscribe to Strange Places Explained for more.